All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and man, we have some crazy stats from this Commanders victory over the Denver Broncos from yesterday. Crazy stats, some advanced stats, some surface stats that are even really impressive, some next-gen stats, pro football focused grades. You'll probably be surprised by who's graded highly and who's graded pretty low. I disagree with some of them, but some of them make a lot of sense, and it's just really interesting to look at and talk about. So we're going to look at all of that. Some of the main takeaways is Sam Howell really a top 10 quarterback in the NFL right now after only 2 starts this season under new Eric Bieniemy, new owner Josh Harris. Also, is this the best D-line in all of football? We're going to take a look at a lot of advanced stats from the O-line, from Brian Robinson, from Sam Howell, the defensive line, of course, the entire defense, what the team has accomplished, Eric Bieniemy, what he's done in 2 games that Scott Turner couldn't even do within 50, all kinds of stuff, man. I already talked about some of these statistics last night in my full breakdown review of that Broncos victory from the Commanders yesterday, but I'm bringing some of those and then like way more even on top of all of that. So you may hear a couple of things that you've already heard before. You feel like, yeah, I've heard that before. I already know that. That's because I talked about it yesterday. But we have a lot more new stuff. The stuff that you've already heard is probably only 5% of what you're going to hear in this video. We have a whole nother 95% of crazy stats to dive into. So before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, man. I really appreciate all y'all, man. Appreciate everybody that pulled up to the live stream, showed love, left a like on it, donated, all of that kind of stuff, man. I really appreciate y'all, man. Y'all do not understand. Shouts out to everybody that donated to the Cash App. And also shouts out to my boy Jeffrey who donated to the PayPal after the stream. I wanted to make sure I said thank you because I wasn't able to say it live. So really appreciate that. We got the Cash App and the PayPal if you want to donate and contribute to the stream. We're working on getting it better and better every day. So, man, I really appreciate y'all. Without further ado, let's get it.
You tell your family you're gonna be a commander.
All right, so first of all, let's start with some really interesting team stats. Again, some of these you may have already heard that I talked about in the video yesterday, but maybe some of y'all didn't see that video. And again, we have a lot more stats coming, but just bear with me, stay a little patient. Just like I talked about yesterday, the Commanders scoring 35 points today was their most since 2020. And we had 2 missed field goals, even though the second one, I don't even know why we attempted that one. That one was really far. Even though Joey Sly has a big leg on him, that's a lot to ask of a guy. So honestly, with 2 missed field goals, best case scenario, maybe we score like 41 points. But honestly, 38 was very realistic with the first one that we missed due to Cameron Cheeseman. But either way, with the 35 that we scored, that's still the most since 2020 for the Commanders. Also, our 18-point road comeback was the largest since 1990. That was a 21-point deficit against Detroit all the way back on November 4th, 1990. I wasn't even alive yet. Again, I wasn't allowed to see any of the Redskins Super Bowls. So that's crazy history right there. These are things that Eric Bieniemy is doing within the first 2 games of being our offensive coordinator. New offense and everything. We still have a few, cracks in the pavement. We're still trying to buff out a few things, still a few scratches, a few mental errors that we're still working on, chemistry, stuff like that. Once we're completely gelled and everybody is completely confident and comfortable in this offense, it's only going to get better. I'm expecting better things than what we've already seen. Also, we're 2-0 for the first time since 2011. So if you think about it, there are 12-year-olds right now that are seeing the Commanders 2-0 for the first time in their lives. That is absolutely shameful. That is really, really bad. Like really, really, really bad. Also, the Commanders defeated Denver for the first time since December 24th, 2017. And this was the first time we did it in Denver since November 18th, 2001. That is insane as well. Also, yesterday's win is Ron Rivera's 100th win. They even talked about that in the locker room after the game, where everybody's celebrating and stuff like that. Also, this is his first time beating Denver, so that's really cool, man. And he's the 8th active head coach to ever eclipse 100 regular season wins, so that puts him in very unique company, very rare company. Shouts out to Rivera, man. But an even bigger shout out to that boy Eric Bieniemy. So we already talked about the 35 points thing, but let's dive into that a little bit deeper. First of all, the Commanders under 2 games with Eric Bieniemy have already scored 35 points in a game just within 2 games. Scott Turner, under 50 games with him over the course of several seasons, the most points we ever scored was 34. 1 point less than what Eric Bieniemy scored within 2 games of being the Commanders' offensive coordinator. If that's not crazy, I don't know what is. Now, Sam Howell is a big part of that. Having Jahan Dotson in the mix is also a big part of it. Logan Thomas, before he got hurt, having him healthy helps a lot as well. We still have some moving pieces on the offensive line, but there's talent there. So there's a lot of factors that go into this, but still at the same time, it took Eric Bieniemy 2 games to do it. Scott Turner couldn't do it 50. That's just absolutely phenomenal. I think Sam Howell probably gets the second most credit for that, but still Eric Bieniemy was in his bag, man. I mean, at a certain point, I don't know exactly how we finished the game, but Washington at a certain point in that game, I believe it was like sometime in the 3rd quarter, maybe or early 4th quarter, we had 9 players with at least 2 receptions each, which was the most in a single game in franchise history. These are things that Eric Bieniemy is accomplishing within his first 2 games as an offensive coordinator / assistant head coach for the Burgundy and Gold. This guy should be a head coach somewhere. I can't believe that he's not, but we are lucky and elated about the fact that he's not a head coach somewhere, because then that means we wouldn't have him, and we more than likely would not be 2-0. That man was in his bag, y'all. That was ridiculous, and that's why I explained this in my review video yesterday in probably more detail. But, you know, just a quick rundown on it. The reason I'm afraid of Commanders players in fantasy football is for that exact reason. Eric Bieniemy is going to spread the ball. We have so many playmakers, so many guys that deserve to get the ball. It's just really hard to predict any singular person going crazy every single game. Right now, your leading candidate is Brian Robinson, with him out there getting like 18 carries and like 5 targets for like 4 catches or something like that. He had like over 120 something all-purpose yards between the run and the pass. Like, that's probably your best bet, because Antonio Gibson only got like 2 carries, but he also got like 1 or 2 catches or something like that. Brian Robinson is like the running back of the show. But receiver-wise, even Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Byron Pringle out here getting catches. Mitchell Tinsley was even in the game at times. He just didn't receive a target. And then 3 tight ends when Logan Thomas is healthy, they can all catch the ball. I mean, John Bates, even though I don't like his hands, he did have a drop. That man did catch that beautiful Sam Howell 35-yard bomb down the sideline. So we have 3 tight ends. We're at least 5 wide receiver deep and 2 running backs deep as far as who can get the ball. And don't forget about the fact that Sam Howell can also run with the ball himself. So outside of Sam Howell, Brian Robinson is like the only guy you can depend on to get you a certain amount of points every game. I'm hoping Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson can become more, fantasy football wise. But as a fan, as a Commanders fan, I don't care anything about fantasy football at all. The fact that we're spreading the ball around like this keeps defenses off balance. They have no idea what to focus on to really try to clamp up. Defensive coordinators can't sleep at night before they have to go against the Commanders, because, I mean, who do you stop? If you focus on stopping Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, and Logan Thomas, you take 1 player from each position group. You still got to deal with Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, who killed the Broncos for a big-time screen, and an even bigger screen against the Bills, who we play this upcoming weekend, where he had the 80-yard touchdown. And then you also have the other 2 tight ends that can contribute. I'm really excited about Cole Turner's role growing. And then again, Sam Howell not only throws the ball, but can run it himself. So it's just like, man, as a defensive coordinator, as defensive players, when you walk into that game, how are you confident about exactly what you're going to do? Because even if, first of all, that's a big if, can you take Terry McLaurin out of a game? I mean, we saw Terry McLaurin was double teamed in the back of the end zone right there, still came up. Beautiful dot from Sam Howell and a great catch from Terry McLaurin. It's like, even if you could somehow prevent that, you still have all of those other guys to worry about. So I love how balanced this offense is, where you have no idea who's going to go crazy any day. Terrible for fantasy, but great for the Commanders and the fan base, man. I absolutely love what we got going on in the Eric Bieniemy. Now moving on to Sam Howell. First of all, 27 to 39, 299 yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and also 2 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays. The reason we look at turnover-worthy plays is because there's sometimes that quarterbacks somehow get away, they get lucky, whatever happens, random factors take place. They threw interceptions. They threw passes that should have been intercepted, like straight to the chest of a DB. But when you look at the end of the game, that DB dropped it. You look at the quarterback stats to see he had no interceptions. Oh, you like, okay, that man was, dotting up. He wasn't trying to turn the ball over or anything. No, it just so happens that DBs don't drop passes as much as they should. Like Russell Wilson had like 3 or 4 plays that should have been intercepted, but at the end of the day, he only had 1 technical interception. So the fact that Sam Howell had 0 turnover-worthy plays, not only 0 turnovers, but 0 turnover-worthy plays, he was dealing, man. That boy was slanging it, boy. I'm telling you. And then that 27-39 is misleading as well. You got to watch the game because some of those were drops. John Bates, Logan Thomas, a couple of other people. And then on top of all of that, Sam Howell threw the ball out of bounds at times, which was the right thing to do. Sometimes the coverage is just set up. There's pressure in his face. Offensive line didn't block well enough. You just got to get rid of the ball to not lose downs, to not end up with a turnover, and to live to fight another play. So some of those incompletions as well are turnovers. So I want to see his true completion percentage. I got to find that somewhere. But Sam Howell balled out today. 27-39 is very misleading. 7.7 yards per attempt is very misleading because a few of those passes, it was the right decision to throw it out of bounds, and that counts as an incompletion. That's unfair. 2 big-time throws along with 0 turnover-worthy plays is absolutely insane. And then, oh, here we go. 87.5 adjusted completion percentage. Because if you're looking at it just base value, the 27 out of 39, that's a 69 completion percentage. Like just base value, that's what we see. But when you adjust it, again, for the factors that I've talked about, people dropping passes, throwing it out of bounds on purpose, like to live to fight another down, he had an 87.5 adjusted completion percentage, which is just absolutely ridiculous. That's elite stuff right there. That's elite. 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, and an 87.5 adjusted completion percentage, and 1 yard away from having 300 yards passing and 2 passing touchdowns. Come on, dog. Like what else is there, man? I'm not going to go out there and say he's a top 10 quarterback yet, but he's definitely working his way up there. I think he easily has top 15 quarterback potential, but I need to see it throughout the entire season, not just 2 games to fully say that. I'm putting my name next to it right now, but I know a lot of people won't admit it until he goes out there and does it for longer, and I understand. But also to get really specific, Sam Howell on throws 20 plus yards down the field. He only attempted 2. He completed both. 65 yards, 1 touchdown, and a 93.9 Pro Football Focus grade on just throws 20 yards or plus down the field. That was the Terry McLaurin touchdown and the John Bates deep ball to the sideline. Just ridiculous stuff. And then let's back up a little bit. So instead of just 20 plus yards, let's talk about 10 plus yards. He went 7 for 9, 128 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Elite stuff right there. Let's back it up a little bit more. Let's say past the sticks, as far as throws that went past the first down, whether it was within 3 yards, 5 yards, 10. It's not specifically 10 every time. It could be 2nd and 7. If you threw it past the 7 yards, that's technically past the sticks. He had an 84.2 Pro Football Focus grade, went 12 of 16, 177 yards, of course 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and 150.3 passer rating. This is elite stuff, y'all. I'm telling y'all. And then if you're just looking at surface stats, so far, out of the entire NFL, Sam Howell is 10th in passing yards with 501, 11th in passing touchdowns with 3, and 6th in completion percentage among quarterbacks with at least 70 pass attempts with a 65.7%. But again, with the way that, sometimes coverage is locking up the receiver, sometimes the offensive line is in his face so fast he can't even read the coverage, so he's having to throw the ball out of bounds. His actual adjusted completion percentage is probably higher than that, probably ranked even higher, maybe even in the top 5 of quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm telling y'all, he's making a case to be a top 10 quarterback by the end of the season. I'm telling you. Now moving on from Sam Howell to Brian Robinson, and this is really interesting as well. First of all, Brian Robinson had his first multi-touchdown game of his career. I mean, no surprise that after being shot a couple of times and recovering from that, he wasn't able to achieve that last year. He still did extremely well, surpassed everybody's expectations for what he did last year. But of course, 2 games into being fully 100% healthy, he finally gets his first multi-touchdown game. It makes a lot of sense. And also, Eric Bieniemy is your offensive coordinator. Also, I want to remind y'all that trade that we gave up the pick to get Jahan Dotson so that the Saints could get Chris Olave, and then after another trade included, at the end of the day, we basically netted Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, Sam Howell, and Cole Turner for Chris Olave. You have your starting, looking like a franchise quarterback to me. I feel like it's definitive at this point. I don't even know why we're still talking about it. Brian Robinson, your star running back, with over 120 all-purpose yards through the air, on the ground. Jahan Dotson is wide receiver 1B, not even a wide receiver 2, another wide receiver 1. And then Cole Turner has so much potential and catches everything thrown towards him, and he's learning to become a better blocker so he can be on the field more often, which will lead to him getting more targets, because if you're on the field more, you have more chances to make plays and make catches. So again, Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, Sam Howell, and Cole Turner for Chris Olave. I'll take that trade any day of the week. Chris Olave is a guy, but he ain't that. He ain't that package right there, man. Slipping. And then also moving on to the O-line, just so we can kind of focus on who we need to blame for certain things. Charles Leno allowed the most pressures with 4. He allowed 1 sack, 1 QB hit, 2 hurries. Sadiq Charles allowed 2 pressures, tied for the least with Samuel Cosmi and Andrew Wiley. He only allowed 2 hurries. Then you had Samuel Cosmi also tied for second, only 2 hurries. Andrew Wiley tied for the least amount of pressures as well, with Samuel Cosmi and Sadiq Charles allowed 2 pressures, which is 1 was a sack and 1 was a hurry. So if you had to say who were the better of the 5 offensive linemen, it would be between Samuel Cosmi and Sadiq Charles, our 2 starting guards. And then you had Nick Gates, who allowed 3 pressures, 2 QB hits and 1 hurry, so he technically had the second worst game. But if you ask me, Andrew Wiley giving up a sack, I don't care if he technically gave up 1 less pressure than Nick Gates. The pressures he gave up hurt us way more than anything Nick Gates gave up. So I think Sadiq Charles and Samuel Cosmi were technically our best offensive linemen. Nick Gates a close third, then arguably Andrew Wiley, and then Charles Leno. Charles Leno was the worst offensive lineman to me, but we're going to take a look at these Pro Football Focus grades to see if they agree. Because remember, they had Charles Leno graded as a top 5, top 8 offensive tackle out of the entire NFL from that Cardinals game. Of course, he didn't look anywhere near as good against the Broncos. We'll see where we have him rated once we get to those Pro Football Focus grades. Now moving on to Chase Young, who balled out, man. That's my boy, man. I told y'all not to give up on him. Now, I understand why a lot of people keep giving up on him, because it doesn't matter how talented you are. Doesn't matter even if he's improved his pass rush plan, gotten more nuanced with as far as rushing the passer, getting pass rush moves, counters, all of that type of stuff, hand placement, hand technique, all of that type. I told y'all, man, he needs to do the little Ip Man, little wooden thing where he's, maybe that'll help him a little bit. But all of that doesn't matter how much of a freak athlete you are. Doesn't matter how technically refined you are, even if you're Nick Bosa technically refined level, if you can't stay on the field to actually go out there and do it for us. But now that he's fully healthy, I'm not surprised at all that he went out there and balled out. First of all, this was his first sack since October 10th, 2021 versus the New Orleans Saints. And like I pointed out yesterday in my video, it seems like whenever Chase Young gets a sack, we're due to somehow give up a ridiculous Hail Mary. For the Saints, I believe it was before halftime. For the Denver Broncos, it was right there to almost tie the game up. So Chase Young, I'm gonna need you to break that curse and get sacks in games where we don't give up Hail Marys, so that we don't have to keep blaming you for that, even though it's not your fault. It's easily the secondary's fault. But Chase Young in his first game back, 1.5 sacks, 7 pressures, 4 QB hurries, 84.6 pass rush grade, and the second highest graded defensive player for the Commanders. Imagine if we didn't have Chase Young in that game, how that game would have went. I want to remind y'all that Jamin Davis forced fumble that literally turned the game around, arguably probably turned our season around, because 2-0 is very different from 1-1, especially just momentum-wise, confidence in the team. That comeback from behind is going to carry us, I think, a really far way. I think now that we see that we're resilient, it's a lot of mental stuff, not just stat sheet wise, not just the fact that we have 1 more win and 1 less loss. I think mentally and emotionally, that come from behind win against the Broncos. We're going to look back by the end of this year, maybe years from now, we're like Super Bowl contenders. We're going to look back and point at that game, that play from Jamin Davis, and be like, that's the one that sent us onto this trajectory. It was a fork in the road. We could have slid down, and now people talking about tanking for Caleb Williams, get rid of Sam Howell, get rid of Ron Rivera, but promote Eric Bieniemy. And then we took the other fork and we said, we're going to come back from behind, win this game, and be true playoff contenders. But again, that Jamin Davis play that started it all, Chase Young was the one with the pressure on Russell Wilson to the inside, made Russell Wilson run outside. Jamin Davis, like a speeding bullet, like the Mario Kart rocket, came in for us to fumble. Cody Barton recovers. Chase Young was the catalyst for that. Emmanuel Forbes, our first round rookie, his first career interception that he finally caught. Chase Young had pressure on Russell Wilson to force him into that bad throw. So that was Chase Young, the reason that Emmanuel Forbes was able to get his first career interception. Chase Young was all over the place, man. The stats are crazy. Yeah, the stats are crazy, but the stats don't just say it all. Because Chase Young, without him, I highly doubt we win that game. He was literally the catalyst for some of our most impressive plays on defense, man. Him and Montez Sweat were meeting at the quarterback. That one time they celebrated while Russell Wilson was still on the ground between them, underneath them. It looked like the Eiffel Tower over them. They were literally meeting at the quarterback. We said that after we drafted Chase Young, all of the hype with him. Montez Sweat had a pretty decent rookie season, freak athlete as well. We were like, man, we got some edge setters that are going to meet at the quarterback. I'll see you over there, Chase Young. Yeah, I'll see you over there, Montez Sweat. I'll see you in 3 seconds over there at Russell Wilson. And they did that like 2 or 3 times. It was crazy. Now, speaking of the defensive line, they were not playing. The Broncos free agent left guard edition, Ben Powers, and right tackle edition, Mike McGlinchey, were 1st and 5th in pressure rate allowed yesterday at 16.7% and 14.3%, which is just ridiculous. Our defensive line literally made the Broncos have 2 of the top 5 worst offensive linemen out of the entire NFL, just statistically, advanced statistics wise. That's what Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Casey Toohill, and James Smith-Williams did to those guys. Because remember, James Smith-Williams, told you, man, that boy borrowed Chase Young's powers for one play. They did the little Space Jam thing, and he brought his powers for one play and was able to get his own sack. We don't know James Smith-Williams is a pass rusher, but he was against the Broncos yesterday. Also, the Commanders starting 4 defensive linemen combined for 25 pressures yesterday. Just the starters, not the entire defensive line, just the starters. That's the most the Big Four has tallied in a single game ever. So the most Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, and Daron Payne have ever had in a game together. It's ridiculous how much better everybody is. It may be we just needed sacrifices. Maybe we needed some games Jonathan Allen hurt so everybody else can be forced to step up. Chase Young hurt for so long, so Montez Sweat and Daron Payne had to step up. Daron Payne was able to get 11.5 sacks and get his money this offseason and had the 11.5 sacks last season. And then now, after everybody's had moments where they've kind of had to carry the D-line with all random injuries everywhere, Montez Sweat being the healthiest of them all, now everybody is so used to carrying. Now that all 4 of them are back together, the band is back together, they're just 4 dominant players all working together at the same time. Chase Young had 7, Montez Sweat had 7 as well, Jonathan Allen had 6, and Daron Payne had 5 pressures. That is absolutely ridiculous from a starting 4 defensive lineman. And just to look at the stats from all of the defensive linemen that really contributed any meaningful snaps and statistics, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, of course, led our team in pressures. They both each had 1.5 sacks. They each had 1 QB hit, and they each had 4 QB hurries. Jonathan Allen had 6 pressures with 6 QB hurries, so all of his pressures were QB hurries, forcing Russell Wilson to get the ball out of his hands way quicker than he wanted to. Daron Payne had 5 pressures, 1 of them being a sack, 3 being 3 QB hits, and then 1 being a hurry. James Smith-Williams had 3 pressures, 1 sack, 2 hurries. And Abdullah Anderson, very sleeper free agency pick from the Falcons. For some reason, they discarded him like as if he wasn't that good. He comes here, he's part of the rotation, 3 pressures, 3 hurries from a super random low-key free agency signing. I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't even realize he made the 53-man roster. But I've been rooting for him since he's been here because he was making plays. He was flashing at times in training camp, and what a great game he had to show up against the Denver Broncos along with everybody else. Also, the Commanders D-line had 3 of the top 5 defensive linemen and 4 of the top 15 defensive linemen in pressures on Sunday. Chase Young and Montez Sweat were tied for 2nd out of all defensive linemen in the NFL with 7. Jonathan Allen was tied for 4th, and Daron Payne was tied for 14th. That is ridiculous, all from one defensive line. You know how hard it is to consistently get pressures when somebody else is getting there possibly before you? Like, say, for instance, Daron Payne only had 5 pressures, but if it weren't for Chase Young and Montez Sweat getting to him so fast and getting sacks on him, maybe Daron Payne would have had more. So that's just extremely impressive that we had 4 guys in the top 15, 3 guys in the top 5. That's like unheard of stuff. There's no other defensive line in football doing that. We have the best defensive line in football. Another statistic, if you want this one, here's another one. Russell Wilson dropped back 39 times. He had 39 passing plays. He was sacked 7, hit 14. So out of 39 dropbacks, 21 times he was beat up. Hit, sacked, whatever. He was on the ground. Po baby. I feel for him, man. You cannot blame that loss on him. He made a lot of mistakes, but when you're under duress like that, who do you expect to perform like that? Tom Brady can't win games like that in his prime. Also, the Commanders are tied for the most sacks this season with the Cowboys. Man, I don't know what the Jets and the Giants got going on because it just seemed like they were giving those 2 teams were giving the Cowboys sacks, where it feels like the Commanders more so earned theirs. But either way, we're tied with the Cowboys for the most sacks in the NFL, 10 each. And then the Cardinals are actually 3rd with 9. They did kill us, and I'm assuming they probably killed the Giants quite a bit. And Then you got the Panthers and Colts and tied for 4th place. So, man, this defensive line is literally the best in football according to a lot of defensive metrics, man. And then overall defense, again, sacks-wise, we have 10, tied for 1st in the NFL. Tackles for loss, we have 16, 2nd in the NFL. And takeaways, 4th. We have 4 of them. We are 4th in the NFL. Remember last year, really the past few years, we've been a top 5, at the very least top 10 defense, but we don't get turnovers. You know how difficult that is to be a top 5 defense that doesn't get turnovers? That's literally unheard of. That's an anomaly. That's almost impossible. But the fact that we're doing that, and on top of the fact that now we brought in Emmanuel Forbes, hopefully Quan Martin can get back healthy and get right. Chase Young is fully healthy. Now we're 4th in NFL in takeaways. We have a top 5 defense. I feel like definitively we're 1st in sacks, 2nd in tackle for loss, 4 in takeaways. But I would argue we have the best defense in football. And then also not even just defense, but offense as well. According to EPA per plays, we now are in the right column and positive in both offense and defense. The only teams that are also positive with us are the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Bills, the Ravens, the Packers, the Buccaneers, Falcons, Chiefs, and the Eagles. That's it. And then there's us. That's pretty good company to be in, to be some of the only teams that are positive in both offense and defense advanced statistics. And then next up, really random stats before we move on to the Pro Football Focus grade. Like I mentioned in my breakdown yesterday, there was a certain point in that game we were down 21-3 with 7 minutes 57 seconds left in the second. The win probability, according to a lot of calculations that go into this stuff, had us losing at a 96.3% chance. We had a 3.7% chance of winning that game, and we somehow pulled it off. That is absolutely ridiculous, man. Also, the NFC East is no longer the NFC least. We are the NFC beast, it looks like, for probably the 2nd year in a row. The best division in football for probably the 2nd year in a row, because right now the NFC East is 7-1. Now the Giants barely got away against the Cardinals, and we barely did as well. Even theirs was even closer than ours was. Like, they super barely got away. But either way, the NFC East is 7-1, and you know where that one loss came from? The Giants losing to the Cowboys, another NFC East team. So right now, technically, no team outside of the NFC East can beat any team in the NFC East right now. The only loss in the NFC East out of all 4 teams is another NFC East opponent beating that NFC East team. Again, the best division in football is ridiculous. Hey, man, we may have to send 4 teams to the playoffs for the first time in NFL history. Also, I talked about this in the video last night as well, but just to repeat, we are one of only 9 teams that are 2-0 right now. And then there's debates going around about who's the best 2-0 team right now. Because you have us, the Eagles, the Buccaneers, the 49ers, the Ravens, the Falcons, Dolphins, and Cowboys. So let me know, man. Who do y'all feel? Who do y'all feel is the best 2-0 team right now? I want to throw a hat in there, but, you know, I'm trying to be a little humble right now, man. We got to go out there and beat the Bills. After we beat the Bills, we're 3-0 after beating the Bills. Then I'm throwing my hat in there to say we're one of the best teams in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. And you know, statistics show law of averages. Some of those 2-0 teams will probably lose next week. Hopefully, we're not one of them. And then we'll probably be one of only like 5 teams 2-0. And then at that point, you got to say we're top 5. You got to look at the power rankings. They got to have us at minimum top 10. So, especially after beating the Bills. Now, offense-wise, Sadiq Charles was our highest graded player with 82.9. Logan Thomas was 2nd. Man, I still can't believe he held onto that ball with that dirty hit. Brian Robinson was 3rd. Cole Turner was 4th. And Sam Howell was 5th. To keep going, Nick Gates was 6th. Samuel Cosmi 7th. John Bates 8th. Antonio Gibson 9th. And then Terry McLaurin 10th. And Ricky Stromberg only played, 1 snap, but he got a 60 grade along with Chris Rodriguez with only 2 snaps. And they were pretty decent. They round out the top 11. Well, tied for 11, technically top 12. Moving on to defense. Well, actually, before we go on to defense, blocking wise, Antonio Gibson had our highest pass blocking grade. Ricky Stromberg, the 1 snap he played, had the 2nd highest. Then it's Cole Turner, then it's John Bates, then it's Sadiq Charles, Nick Gates, Samuel Cosmi, Charles Leno, Andrew Wiley, and then Brian Robinson had a 17.9. I don't think I've seen a grade that low in any statistical category, but he had such a great game. He still was one of our highest graded offensive players, like I already told you, with a 76.8. So even with that terrible blocking, he just ran so well, it canceled all of that out and more than made up for it. Then run blocking wise, Sadiq Charles was our best one by far with the 85.9 grade. Nick Gates was 2nd with the 74.8. Samuel Cosmi was 3rd with a 66. John Bates was a 65.1, not surprised. And Charles Leno was 5th with a 61.6. But you can see, as you can see, our interior offensive line seems like the best part of our offensive line right now. And I feel like most people would have assumed that before the season even started. But now you have definitive proof. Then moving on to defense, our highest graded defender was Deron Payne, and no surprise because he literally took over a drive. You know how hard it is to take over a drive, not only as one singular player in such a team-based sport like football. It's not basketball. This is football. And then not only is it a defensive player in a league where the offense literally has every advantage over the defense possible. You literally, if it's a 50-50 situation, the offense is always at an advantage. And then not only are you a defensive player, you're a defensive lineman. Not only are you a defensive lineman, you're not an edge rusher, you're an interior defensive lineman. To take over an entire drive yourself, that's elite Hall of Fame level stuff. I mean, you can probably count on 2 hands people that have ever done something like that. First down, sack. Second down, tackle for loss. Third down, batted down ball. How do you take over a whole series like that? Literally single-handedly put a defense on your back for a whole set of downs and completely take over a game like that. So, with good reason, he's our highest graded defender with an 86. Chase Young, a pretty distant second with a 76, but that's still a great point, 76.1. That's still a really high grade. Casey Toohill, 3rd. Benjamin St. Juste 4th, Kendall Fuller 5th, Jamin Davis 6th, then Montez Sweat, then Cameron Curl, then Derek Forrest, and it keeps going and going and going. Percy Butler was our lowest rated defender. I'm not surprised with a 33.8 because of that big play he gave up, and then I guess he didn't recover. Then Emmanuel Forbes, they did not like Emmanuel Forbes at all. He's our 2nd lowest graded defender, 15th out of 16 graded players with a 36.4. I thought he looked pretty good from the times I noticed him, but I guess I got to look at the all 22 to get the full picture. And then coverage-wise, they felt like Benjamin St. Juste was our best coverage corner, best coverage player, period. Then there's Kendall Fuller, then there's Cameron Curl, then there's Montez Sweat, then Derek Forrest, then Abdullah Anderson, then Jonathan Allen, Jamin Davis, Cody Barton, then Emmanuel Forbes, and then Percy Butler. They felt like Emmanuel Forbes and Percy Butler were worse in coverage than Cody Barton, and I refuse to accept that. I refuse, because there was a certain point in that game they were literally attacking Cody Barton both in the running game and the passing game. Cody Barton's over there, all right, run it that way. Cody Barton's in zone coverage right here, then throw it to the receiver that's coming across his middle. Golly, man. But either way, hey, man, like I said, I don't completely agree with Pro Football Focus grades, but I do agree with some of them. And, you know, it's pretty decent insight. I mean, those guys put a lot of time and effort and work into coming up with those grades. So I don't completely dismiss them, even though, again, I do disagree with them a lot of the time. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button. First of all, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Sam Howell potentially being a top 10 quarterback. This defensive line being the best defensive line in football. This defense being easily a top 5 defense in football. Brian Robinson being the star of the show. Eric Bieniemy completely changing the trajectory of this entire franchise. And also, of course, let me know how you feel about these types of videos. Do you want me to continue to do this every week after a game, bring y'all advanced stats and Pro Football Focus grades like this? Let me know that. And of course, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of y'all. Again, if you want to support the channel because YouTube's tripping right now, you can donate to the Cash App, $RicoScores, and the PayPal, WilliamAC94@gmail.com. Man, I really appreciate y'all, and I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.